Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to do a little bit of a different kind of video than what I normally do. I thought with everything going on in the world today, it would be a good idea to kind of take a small inventory of the overarching threats that we are facing, and then also specific things that you can do to deal with those. And I think this is going to be especially useful if you're somebody who is a newer prepper. You kind of got started with all this just because you saw the world kind of go into pot, and it can get a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So today we're going to take a look at the stuff that's going on and then talk about action steps that we can do that can help us deal with those specific types of issues. So the specific things that we are dealing with today can be kind of boiled down to a few different threats. Now, of course, if you live in Europe and you have that conflict going on very close to you, of course, then you have a lot more to worry about. Now, most of my audience, they're in the continental United States with some folks over in Canada, and then there's also some over in Europe. But most of this is going to be geared more towards folks in the U.S. Now, the main threats that we're dealing with, first one is inflation, and then you can also couple that with food scarcity. We have seen prices just increase and increase and increase, and y'all, I really don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. You know me, I'm not an alarmist, I'm not the Chicken Little type, but at the same time, you have to look at the progression of things, how things have been going, and ask yourself, is there anything really that's going to slow that down or make it better anytime soon? And at least from where I'm sitting, barring some miracle, the answer is no, at least for the next several months, maybe year, maybe longer, who knows. But you can also couple that with food scarcity. Things are getting more expensive, and there's other things at work that are making certain things harder to find. We already saw that with baby food, and there's a very good chance that it's going to affect other things as well. If you're part of my European audience, I believe y'all have it worse than we do over here. I think y'all have seen food get a little bit harder to come by in some cases. Of course, Ukraine is a major exporter of wheat, and with what's going on there, of course, that's going to affect things negatively. And then also, while there's inflation, there's also another side, economically speaking, and the worse things get, especially for these companies, if we start to have less demand in the marketplace, then how major companies deal with that sort of thing is they start to lay people off. So there's economic uncertainty too. If you work in a lot of industries, there might be a chance that your job could be threatened soon. Hopefully not, but that's something that you need to have contingencies in mind for. And then the first two kind of lead to the third, and that is an increase in violence and crime. Especially here in the United States, there is a lot of division going on. We've seen people on both sides of the aisle get upset about different decisions that have been made. And then you combine just that political strife with the fact that there are economic problems going on and might continue down the pipe. Whenever you have a lot of angry people that, especially whose livelihoods have been threatened, then you start to see more kind of violent protest stuff. You also start to see property crime increase, and the more desperate people get, the worse that they're going to get. So those are kind of the main threats. Now, what do you do about it? And fortunately, the answer is pretty simple. A lot of times as preppers, we tend to overcomplicate things a lot of the time. We kind of veer more towards, well, what if the reptilians from Nibiru attack, or there's a herd of chicken pigs that escape from a cave and then they attack us? But really, the answer is much more simple, and really right now, I would be focusing on your food storage first and foremost, especially if you're somebody who hasn't been at this in a while. And if you don't have much food storage and you don't have money, now's not the time to be freaking out because you can't go out and buy a year's worth of freeze-dried food, so you just sit there, you get paralyzed, and you do nothing. There are things that you can still do that, while they're not as cheap as they might have been a month or two ago or even longer, they're still doable. So focus on things like getting canned goods, getting dry goods. And if you can't store those dry goods in Mylar, store them in something else. Store them in Ziploc bags. Key is, have some food that you can eat if things get difficult to find or if they continue to get even more expensive than they are now. If you cannot prepare to survive for years, then prepare to survive for months. Do what you can. Don't assume that because you don't have X amount of food set aside that there's just no point in you surrender. Don't do that. Do what you can. Do what is least expensive and will give you the biggest bang for your buck. Y'all, beans and rice, they can go a long way towards giving your body what it needs. Now, of course, it needs more, but I mean, you have your protein source there. Canned goods, you can get some meats, you can get fruits, veggies to give your body other things that it needs, and multivitamins are great also. And the key is foods that require very little preparation in case there turns out to be some sort of grid down situation. I know that out west we're having issues with Lake Mead getting extremely low, and the Hoover Dam's ability to generate electricity might be threatened. I know that that's a big concern. My dad, he does work out that way, and he said that is a concern. So you want to have food that you're not going to have to prepare on an electric stovetop. And also, just like I said, do what you can. And then the second part is have a defense plan. You need to have the tools and the training to do whatever you need to do. And that's going to be different for people in different places. If you're part of my European audience, then bless your heart, you're very restricted on what you can do. I live in Texas where it's pretty much cowabunga, yeehaw. So know what you can do where you live and get the training to back that up. Have the most effective tools that you can afford and that you can have. Also, don't overlook early warning systems. A lot of times we tend to focus more on the actual once somebody is in our space, what we have to do about that. But y'all, if you can prevent them from ever getting into your home and getting into your space, that is far preferable. So things like battery-operated motion sensors, that you can stick some rechargeable batteries, and that can be a very good long-term early warning system to help you know if somebody's rolling up on you. And then even in the meantime, son, if you have a doorbell camera, that could be a good tool to use at least until the grid goes down. Now, if the grid goes down, it's going to be kind of worthless. That's why you want to have some off-grid options like those battery-operated motion sensors. But also know what you're going to do under different circumstances. You and your family need to have a plan. Know what you're going to do. Know how you're going to defend yourself. Know the red lines. And also know when you are going to leave. If you live in an area that might experience some sort of unrest, you need to decide now while you can think clearly and you're not under the gun, so to speak. You need to know when you're going to stay, when you're going to go, and have all that worked out. Know how you're going to leave. Have your bug out plan ready to go, and know what you're going to take with you. Know different routes out of town in case some of them are blocked. Do all those good, just basic prepper things. And you also need to know what's going on in your neighborhood, in your city, your county, and then also your country and the world at large, because you don't want to miss anything. Things like the Nextdoor app, if your community is a part of that, or nextdoor.com, they have an app too. It's a good way to keep track of if there's just kind of just small-time crime going on in your neighborhood. Like, good grief, we don't even live in a bad area, but our neighbor had his stinking tires stolen off of his car while he was on vacation. That's good stuff to know. But that leads me to the next thing. While you need to know what is going on in your area and kind of the world at large, just so you can have an idea of how you need to adjust your preps accordingly, you also want to be disciplined about your media consumption. You want to find the line between burying your head in the sand and not keeping up with anything, because some people do that. Not necessarily preppers, because we like to be on top of things, but don't be so, I guess, overwhelmed by it all that you just shut it out. I mean, I think probably a lot of us have been guilty of that at some point or another. Like I said, not really preppers as bad, but On the other side of things, don't let it completely consume you either. Because what can happen is if you focus too much on the negative and you just sit in front of a computer all day, then you're going to suffer from what's called analysis paralysis. You aren't going to know what to do. Too much information can bog you down to the point where you cannot act in such a way as what would be beneficial to you. So really try your best to strike a balance between not having enough information and then having way too much information that you can't even do anything with. And another thing is start working on having multiple income streams, if at all possible. And y'all, I'm not going to be like, oh, here's a course that'll teach you how to do this and you can replace your day job in 3 months. And I'm not going to do that nonsense to y'all. But with all that economic uncertainty, if companies start to lay people off, it's a good idea to not be as reliant on one source of income. So even if it's something small, like a hobby, like you like building things, maybe you can sell things at a local flea market, but just have some way that you can generate some income if your primary source of income disappears. And I mean, who knows, eventually maybe it can turn into something that you can do full time. That's a goal for a lot of people. But point is, don't put all your eggs in one basket with something as important as what enables you and your family to eat and pay the bills. And then also, lastly, take a mental inventory. You know what you have and you know what you do not have. So think about maybe the last storm that came through where the power went out, or if you were listening to the news and you heard about this could happen and your mind went, man, I wish I had that. Maybe consider go ahead and picking that up. Maybe it's some sort of off-grid cooking method. I know that was me there for a while. I didn't really have many ways to cook off-grid, and I sure didn't have enough fuel to be able to keep them running long-term. So that is something that I've addressed, and I kind of hopped, skipped, and skedaddled to the other side of things where maybe I have a little bit too much of certain things. But if you live in a heavily wooded area like I do, get you a rocket stove. Or if you can't afford something like a dedicated pre-made rocket stove, get yourself some cinder blocks and some papers and build one for like probably under 25 bucks, maybe. I'm just guesstimating. But point is, have some ways that you can cook off-grid, and then whatever else you need. It might not be that. Maybe you don't have enough batteries for your flashlight. Maybe you've been putting off getting a generator. But point is, whatever it is, go ahead and take care of those things so it'll help you sleep a little bit better at night. So, hope you guys enjoy this. I know it was a little bit different than what I normally do. I'm probably not going to go through and make it all pretty and put a bunch of stock footage and get rid of all my ums and ands, and so y'all get to see the real mess of me before I do all the pretty editing. But thank you guys for stuff. That's what I mean. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one. Thanks again.